Ya estamos.
Ok, hola, ¿qué tal? Muy buenas tardes. Estamos en el 7º Congreso de Construcción de Paz con Perspectiva de Género y en esta ocasión tenemos el panel número 27 que lleva por nombre Desafiando la violencia de género, tejiendo solidaridad, exploración transnacional de justicia y construcción de paz. Este panel ha sido organizado por el Centro de Justicia y Paz de la Eastern Mennonite University de Estados Unidos y será moderado por Paula Ditzel Pachi. Paula es doctora en Estudios para la Paz por la Universidad Jaume I de España, además de enseñar en el CJP. Enseñó en Brasil, Austria y Alemania y fue investigadora visitante en el Instituto Kroc de Estados Internacionales para la Paz. Sus últimas publicaciones son Dancing Conflicts, Unfolding Pieces y Practitioner Toolkit Gender in Peace and Conflict de 2020. Anteriormente, Paula trabajó durante 5 años con proyectos sociales y educativos en Brasil, su país natal. Bienvenida, Paula, y bienvenida a las demás personas del CJP que estarán en este panel. Muchas gracias por organizarlo y saludos a todo el equipo del CJP en Virginia. Gracias.
Muchas gracias, Elvia. Saludos a todos. Welcome, everyone. Bienvenidas, bienvenidos. Es un gusto saludarlos desde el Center for Justice and Peace Building en Harrisonburg, Virginia. Y esta ponencia se realizará en inglés y hay traducción al español disponible. Nos invitamos a todos aquellos que quieran accionar a la traducción. And then we'll switch to English. It's really a pleasure to join the 7th Conference on Peace Building from a Gender Perspective. And I would like to extend our gratitude and appreciation for Elvia and everyone in the team that is making this conference happen. I think this conference is such an important initiative for keeping us discussing about this important topic. So thank you very much for organizing it and for, well, having us join as well. It's a great opportunity and we are very happy to be here today to continue these conversations. My name is Paula. Elvia has kindly presented me already, and I would like to present and introduce you all to the panelists of today. I will introduce you to their bios right before their presentations. But for now, I would like to present you to Corey Schaefer, Vimarsana Hanasinghe, and Stella Kayenga, and Philippe Puentque. And we are, very happy to join you today. Before we get started, we would like to give you a note about the topics that we will cover today. And I would like to invite Corey to share about it.
Thank you, Paula. So today we will be covering topics that include violence, trauma, oppression, and domination. These are painful realities that do exist in our world. We study them to inform our ability to respond and to promote change. We ask you that you take care of yourself while you listen to our presentation today. If for any reason something is activated in you and you need to step away, we will not judge you at all. And we are dropping 2 resources in the chat currently, one in English and one in Spanish, to the Capacitar Emergency Response Handbook. This has some tools and somatic tricks to help you respond to any central nervous system activation that might come up from covering these topics today. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. And I would get us started with the first presentation, which is called Gender in Peace and Conflict, a Practical Framework. And I think the idea is to introduce a little bit the framework that this presentations will take place. The presentations were developed as part of a class that is called Global Challenges, Local Struggles, Transnational Solidarities, that we did here at the Center for Justice and Peace Building. And the research that you will see shared started or got continued in that class, and then I think got expanded also from that class. So I'll introduce us a little bit to the framework where it comes, that provided the context for this research, and then each of the presentations that will follow will talk a bit more specifically about the research that they have done. And yeah, next please. And this is a bit of the agenda for the first for this first part, which is my presentation, and talking a little bit about my personal perspective, what are the experiences that inform my approach to this to gender in peace building, and to this course in more specifically. We'll have some time to dedicate it to understanding and complexifying peace, conflict, and gender. We'll also have discuss a little bit about intersectionality and intersectionality in peace building, and then going more specifically into the pedagogical framework that we have developed for this class, as a way of incorporating intersectionality, as a way of looking at the challenges that are out there regarding gender in peace and conflict, and also ways to foster solidarities to face them. And then in the part of waving solidarities is where we'll also hear from the research that has been done by the groups. And here's a little bit about me. I'm a dance and peace researcher, and I also facilitate creative approaches to conflict transformation. I am a Brazilian native, currently living in the US, and I do have this professional background with popular education in Latin America. Currently teaching at CJP. So I think all of those experiences inform how I perceive, and also how I have contributed to develop this framework. And this is just a perspective on how this research interest on gender and social justice has connected to the research and work that I do in peace building. I have since early been interested in arts and contemplative practices and creativity, as well as education, peace and conflict. And gender and social justice has been there as a concern, yet it gained, I think it heightened my interest in deepening research about gender and social justice as I was doing research on embodied ways of transforming conflicts, and also facilitating experiences of movement and dance connected to conflict transformation, that I got closer to an understanding of the embodied layers of cultural violence, and violence in all its phases, that I have both suffered and perpetrated, and also the ones that I have perpetuated via systems of oppression that I'm connected with. So seeing those layers very clearly, not only in a rational, but also in an embodied way, I think has prompted me to learn more about how gender how systems of oppression influence on the ways that we look at social change and the ways that we do peace building. And also another, I think, layer of what encouraged me to and gave me the nudge to look deeper into gender and social justice have been political turmoils, the elections in 2016 here in the US, the elections in 2018 in Brazil, which were very, caused a lot of frustration, and also shock in realizing how systems of oppression were embedded in narratives, so present in the political scenario. And so those were like experiences which led me to look deeper into gender and social justice, and also trying to unveil how systems of oppression cross through both like the intrapersonal layer to global layers. So that those were kind of the motivations to look at it. And then I think here we're moving to as the second item on the agenda, which is understanding and complexifying peace, conflict, and gender, which I think is a call of many feminist initiatives and like feminist research. Like how can we complexify and see different ways in which peace and conflict and gender are connected, not only in a kind of out there way, but also very close to the everyday reality. And here are a few questions that we have also discussed in that classroom in preparation for that final project. So what is peace for you? How do you define it conceptually? How and when do you experience it? How often, right? And what could be ways of experiencing it more often? And why are those questions important? Because the ways in which peace is understood define the strategies that are put into practice to foster it, right? If I understand peace as something that I will only achieve in the future, then my strategies will follow one way. If I understand peace as something that is that needs to be cultivated, that is available, of course, in different ways, in a way that doesn't negate conflict and violence, but that can also be practiced and cultivated and nurtured, then the strategies to foster it will be different. So knowing what are our understandings and what are the strategies that we put into practice can be very helpful. Also to establish the solidarities, right? To wave solidarities among the groups working for social change. And I think it leads to this next question, which is, what is the peace that we as a community want to see and experience? And how can we provide conditions for it to unfold? So these are questions that we investigate in the class, and also coming or complexifying peace, not as only one piece, but as pieces, right? Pieces as many as human beings are out there in the world. And also looking at peace as something that is local, that is connected to people, that is plural, and that also depends and relates to environment and communities and land and culture, but which is very specifically contextual. And I think seeing pieces as multiple asks for an openness to different interpretations of peace, but it doesn't mean that anything goes, right? Because as we also discuss in this class, sometimes my definition of peace might cause harm to others, as historically has been the case, right? If we take an understanding of peace that is connected to colonialism, for example. So this understanding of peace as in plural asks for and invites engagement in criticism and dialogue. And it's also, I think it also encourages questioning limitations and aspects that might be violent in some of those understandings, and also as contexts change through time, and also as relationships change. And I think it's also an invitation to see this pieces as a process of learning and co-creation, right? Not as something that we take from somewhere and apply it somewhere else, but as something that is co-created with the people and also the environment that is around. And here, an approach to conflicts, understanding conflicts not only as, and differentiating conflicts a bit from violence, right? Violence as that which causes harm and needs to be stopped, and conflicts as something that is natural of human relationships that can point that can be transformed, right? So we're taking an approach following conflict transformation that invites us to creatively explore possible changes, encouraging greater understanding of underlying relational and structural patterns, while also building creative solutions that improve relationships. So we don't overlook the violence and the conflict and the suffering that is there. And it's like a both and also see ways in which we can transform them somehow. And this is a process that is systemic, and it also, I think, understands that as peace builders or as community mobilizers or as researchers, we are not external observers separated from the topic, but we are part of the conflict systems that we intend to transform. And that means that transformation is not only out there somewhere in the world, or in the field, but it is within and between oneself and others, right? Our families, our organizations, our communities, and our society. So I think to connect it more explicitly with gender and systems of oppression, misogyny and patriarchy are not abstract things out there, but they definitely cross our very existence and is also inscribed in our very body. So taking the systemic approach, I think, helps seeing multiple ways of contributing to transformation from where we stand. And here just a brief note about like gender and what is it how we are defining it, or at least beginning sharing a common understanding in which we can continue deepening and unfolding this understanding. So understanding it as a social system where like, people, objects, practices, and numerous other things are characterized as masculine or feminine, or both, based on qualities conventionally associated with men and women. So this is like a working a definition for us to continue work from. And here I have two examples. Coming from Brazil, a soccer ball, for example, has been in my like in the narratives where I've grown up with, has been frequently associated with men, right, with a masculine thing, despite the fact that we have one of the best players in the world, that is Marta, and flowers on the other side is one example of something that is often associated with women. So I think those pictures can help us see that gender as a system that goes beyond like just humans, but really crosses through the ways that we understand reality. And gender understood also as something that is constructed and learned through the socialization processes, and whose rules create inequalities in their responsibilities, rights, and opportunities between people, following the dichotomy of the masculine and femininity. And here it is understanding from gender equality from the UN Women, that people's rights, responsibilities, and opportunities, and this is like the hope that what we are working for, that they do not depend on whether people are born or are identified as male or female, right? That it goes much beyond that, and rights and responsibilities and opportunities being guaranteed beyond that. And here is an example of an illustration that has been done that I find very insightful. And this idea of like on the one box, the equality in which everyone receives the same box to stand up and look. And then the second one looking at equity, in which everyone receives what is needed depending on the needs. And then the third box, which I also find very interesting and insightful, that is the liberation. So the fence is removed, right? The fence that is separating that is removed. And then I like the idea of like an empty box there with the invitation to draw your idea here. So what is it that we could imagine beyond that whenever we don't have like rights or opportunities tamed and blocked based on gender rules and gender restrictions. And well, you feel free to at some time imagine filling that fourth box and imagining what is it that you would draw in there. And I think connecting gender also with other systems of oppression can be very helpful in understanding how the systems work in like crossing ways, and how understanding underlying dynamics as for awareness, ongoing awareness of both intrapersonal and collective layers and how they are related. So looking at self, family, community, society, and globe. On the one hand, it can be, I think, hard to look at the global trends and see ourselves connected on it. And yet, I think it's, well, very important because in this perspective, they are intrinsically connected, and connecting ourselves to those global dynamics can also help us see possibilities of transformation, right? Next steps that we can take from where we are right now that can contribute for transformation on this many layers. And here are questions that we have also engaged in that class, which I find helpful in the process. So what are the violence that I and my organization perpetuate in daily life? How can these patterns be changed? What are ways that I daily resist oppressions and co-create new possibilities? Because these things also happen, they coexist, right? And I think the invitation, how can I make my workplace more, or my family, or my school, or my classes more diverse, inclusive, aware, and responsive? And I think in working with those systems of oppression and responding to those questions that can be very challenging, intersectionality gives us is a helpful resource, a helpful lens to help us in that work of identifying violences and also transforming them. And intersectionality says that race, class, gender, sexuality, disability, ethnicity, nation, religion, age, and other characteristics which are hierarchized, they're excess of social division that operate not in exclusion, but that they build on each other, and then gain meaning from power relations of racism, sexism, heterosexism, class exploitation, and so on. And this definition comes from Collins and Bilge. And I think intersectionality helps us look at the multiple nature of individual identities and how they position each individual differently in this dynamics of power. Looking at where is it that we have privilege, where is it that we have power, and looking at power on its like multiple expressions, not only power over, which is important to take into consideration, but also power with, right? Power within, and power to. So looking at these dimensions of power as well, and shifting from an either or frame to a both and. So adding complexity to the analysis, which will also potentially and hopefully lead to more alternatives for transformation. And here are some core ideas of intersectionality to understand the social inequality that is present. Take power relations into account. Consider the relationality of aspects and investigate specific social contexts in which these factors constellate in complexity. So part of the, as I'll talk later, part of the assignment that the groups will present here was to look at 3 different contexts and seeing how these systems of oppression might be expressed in different contexts, using intersectionality as a tool for social justice. And this is what is called the intersectional onion, and it has been designed by Bassett, and I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, in a text from 2020. And I think it highlights the multiplicity of both the intrapersonal individual identities, as well as its connection to systems of oppression, and how it's important to understand one's location in a context and the conditions of a social situation in which a position arises, and how this is ongoing, right? Because my positionality in one context, my positionality in Brazil, for example, is different if I am in São Paulo, if I'm in the countryside, if I am here in the United States. So it's an ongoing reflection about how the positionality is depending on the context in which we are in or which we are studying and analyzing. And thinking about using intersectionality in peace building, what are the possibilities that are there? And it sharpens a view into both the interlocking systems of power and oppression, the entanglement of the field with colonialism, neocolonialism, exploitative capitalism, and its precedents from a neoliberal frame in terms of the field, and the connection between personal, interrelational, and structural violence. Inviting also to focus on socio-cultural, political, and religious dynamics at place. I think it invites for this responsibility for history and power structures informing one's own positionality. So who am I as a researcher looking at those contexts? Continual self-reflection of contextual positionality, privilege, and also suffering, right? What are the sufferings that I bring onto this analysis? How do I respond to the suffering that is there? Speaking from one's own experience, listening to others' experiences, and opening space for other voices to be heard, and shifting away from charity or savior complex. And this is also something that we discuss a lot in that class, looking at, how harm has been caused when peace building is done from those 2 stances, right? And how can we shift that mindset from like a charity or a savior complex towards justice and transformation, to act strategically with others for transforming interconnected violences and promoting pieces that resonate in the context. And here are a few other questions that I think might be helpful in this process. How have experiences with gender, race, class, nationality, ethnicity touched and transformed you? How do your understandings and experiences with gender relate to your inner and interpersonal relations? What are the implications of these connections and frictions in your life? How do you deal with the contributions, challenges, and implications of those experiences as a peace and conflict worker? What is your positionality and locus of enunciation and that of your institution in the conflictive systems you find yourself in? So what are the privileges and violent patterns intertwined there? And here more questions, because asking questions can be very helpful in order for cultivating that ongoing reflection. So what are your differences and similarities with other people? What are your biases? How can you act upon them in order to transform them? As well, what are your sources of power and energy? What is it that motivates you? what is your locatedness in this subjective, relational, and global layers of gender in peace and conflict? And what transformative and healing processes can you put in motion in yourself and your community for conflict transformation? And here a quote that I find very inspiring from Audre Lorde. Change means growth, and growth can be painful, but we sharpen self-definition by exposing the self in work and struggle together with those whom we define as different from ourselves, although sharing the same goals. And she says, for Black and white, old and young, lesbian and heterosexual, women alike, and she's addressing a women's conference in this quote. This can mean new paths to our survival. And I think this is the kind of the framework that is that I'm bringing and that we have discussed in class as well. And here I'd like to give credits regarding the course structure to Tim Seidel, Johanna McCann-Turner, and Taliba Akil, who have taught this class before and organized the structure of it. And I think the course is the pedagogical framework in which we try to offer the structure for working with intersectionality as a tool for, as a lens to looking at social injustices, systems of oppression, and how we can transform them. And how it started in class. So we started with an activity that is borrowed from Theater of the Oppressed, that is called the Siren's Call, in which the participants are invited to think of or to let emerge a sound that connects them with a struggle that they have in terms of social justice. So the groups were formed following the approximations or resonances to the sounds that were made, which was an interesting connection. And then they are invited to work on a project that has 5 steps, if I'm counting right. The first one is narration, which is looking at examples of violence in 3 different national contexts. Manifestation, which is the analysis of these different contexts using lenses from like conflict analysis and peace building. The third one is inspiration, looking at examples of responses to these forms of violence that have been tried in the world or coming up with possibilities themselves. And then doing a work of imagination, imagining a new story where transformation has happened, which I think is interesting into making what could be like abstract or far away, closer into a possibility and help imagine actions for transformation. And application, which is a response that engages the narrative, the violent narrative, and moves towards a new story. And here are just an introduction to some of the tools that you see them using. This is the conflict tree. It is, I think, a common tool for conflict analysis. Basically, at the core, at the trunk, you have the core issue, and then you have root causes and consequences. And you can work with it as one tree to help grasp the complexity of what is there. And you could also work with it in using different trees that are more appropriate to different contexts, and also using it as, for example, looking at forests where you can see those many, because conflicts are often very complex. So there are suggestions of using it, for example, as a banyan tree or as the aspen pine trees, which connects underneath the soil. So there are possibilities there. And the other one that you hear them talking about is the theories of change. So this idea of looking at what are the expected results, what are the activities that we are planning to put in place, and really digging into, well, what is the theory of change that we see there? How are we expecting that the activities that we're planning will give the results that we are expecting. And I think all of this, the intention is both deepening analysis and understanding, and also seeing ways of waiving solidarities. Being reflective about solidarity, of superficial solidarity, just as accommodation or settler moves to innocence, as the Kenyan put it on their work from 2012. But also seeing solidarity as strategic and contingent collaborations. And also this idea of pluriversal articulation that comes from Zuma Palermo, the colonial researcher from Argentina, which connects well, I think, with this idea of like the World Social Forum, thinking of like another world is possible, and another world in which many worlds are possible. And with that, I thank you very much, and I would like to invite the other presenters of today, Corey and Bima. So Corey Schaefer, and the title of their presentation is "Breaking the Silence on Gender-Based Violence." Corey is an American student of conflict transformation with a focus on gender and queer studies, and Corey entered the field of peace building when he co-founded an LGBTQ community center in 2021, and now pairs his educational experience with his continued leadership of local rural queer community. Corey is passionate about waving brave, resilient, trauma-informed, and sustainable threads through his community's web as they engage the journey towards liberation. And Vimarshana Hanasinghe, who is a peace builder and a facilitator who has been working in the field of peace building for the last 12 years. Vimarshana has been associated with initiatives of Change International since 2012 and is a certified trainer of creators of peace, women peace circles. She has been facilitating programs on personal transformation, conflict management, gender advocacy, and nonviolent communication. So please, Corey and Bima, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Paula. As Paula introduced us, my name is Corey.
Yes, I'm Bima.
And we want to thank you all for joining our presentation today. Before we get started, we would like to honor and thank our fellow classmates, Mary Mal and Ishtiaq Khan, who formulated this project with us. We thank them for their involvement and their support.
Before we begin, we want to say that Paula presented the framework that we worked on. And for this research, we recall the times in our own lives and in the lives of those dear to us, where we decided to put a stop to systems of oppression and domination that surrounded us. Not everybody has the power and ability to say stop in response to the oppression they face. So we use our power as students to give voice to people who have been silenced. So we recognize early on our research that gender, specifically women and transgender people, are commonly under threat due to discrimination, oppression, and silencing. For the purpose of this project, we define silencing as preventing people who experience oppression from self-advocating, preventing members of society from openly discussing an injustice, and purposefully and consistently ignoring requests for visibility and acceptance from oppressed identities. So these were the definitions we came up with. And Paula explained that we worked on 3 different contexts. We choose to focus on these 3 contexts that you see on our presentation: Pakistan, Iran, and the United States of America. In Pakistan context, we looked into the pervasive continuation of honor killings despite legislative measures. In Iran, we looked into the government-sponsored suppression of women protesters. In the United States, we investigated legislative attempts at erasing transgender identities from public discourse. Now, we are moving into the narration of each of these contexts.
Thank you, Wima. So we're going to share 3 short stories, one from each context. We begin in the context of Pakistan with A Girl in the River. Actually, we can go back one step. The Price of Forgiveness. You can scan the QR code that's on the screen if you would like, and it can take you to the source of the documentary if you would like to learn more about the story. Saba Kaiser, a 19-year-old woman from the Punjab province of Pakistan, survived an attempted honor killing at the hands of her father and uncle. She married Mohammed Kaiser without her family's permission or approval. While her father initially accepted their marriage, her uncle objected, claiming Mohammed was too poor. Swearing on the Quran that they would not harm Saba or Mohammed, Saba's father and uncle invited them to return home and marry the proper way. In a shocking turn of events, Saba's father and uncle took her to a river, shot her in the head, and left her to die. Miraculously, Saba clung to a bush, saved herself, and credits God's intervention for saving her life. Similarly, her father and uncle claim they acted in the name of honor and are protected by religious teachings. As the case is brought into the public and eventually to court, Saba asserts her right to love and marry as she pleases and refuses to forgive her father and uncle, who are imprisoned, with a chance of release only if they are forgiven. Saba's lawyer supports her decision not to forgive at first, but a new lawyer is then assigned to her case who urges her to forgive her father and uncle. The film ends with Saba offering her forgiveness and going to live with her husband's family, remaining in contact only with her mother. Saba says, quote, "If the elders hadn't pressured me, I would have never forgiven them. In my heart, they are unforgiven." This is the ongoing story of honor killings. In most cases, the victim is dead and does not get to offer or deny forgiveness. Still, those family members who choose to kill their family for the sake of honor so often go free and, more than that, feel justified in their actions.
Then we are moving into the narration from Iran. Masha Amini, a 22-year-old woman, was arrested in Tehran, Iran, for improperly wearing her hijab on 13 September 2022. She was beaten into a coma in the detention center and died 3 days later on 16 September 2022. An ongoing series of protests have taken place in solidarity with Masha Amini. The Iranian government insisted that Masha died from a heart attack, but report indicates that she died from a skull fracture due to heavy blows to the head. Iranian women were burning hijabs and cutting their hair in public as a demonstration to show their resistance towards Iran's government. A historian and a women's rights activist, Nina Ansari, shared with the Forbes magazine that Masha Amini is now a global symbol for freedom, not just in Iran. What began as a protest against the Iranian government's treatment of women has evolved into an international movement advocating for women's freedom. Masha's impact on this movement is significant, and her relatability as an everyday person made her a symbol of many. The protest spread beyond the Kurdish community, which Masha belonged to, with her funeral turning into massive demonstration against the mandatory hijab law and the Islamic Republic. Heidi Gami, the leader of Center for Human Rights in Iran, stated that, quote, "She wasn't an activist. Every family in Iran could relate with her face and her experience because every time their mothers, sisters, and daughters left the house, the morality police will follow them, detain them, or even beat them. Tragically, Masha Amini is not the only person to die at the hands of the Iranian moral police, with human rights organizations estimating a higher death toll than the government's claims. Activist Masit Al-Nijad believe in the strength of Iranian women, unfortunately, in the stage of hopelessness. She described a teenage girl whose mother told her not to participate in the protest out of fear that she would be killed. Then the teenage girl told her mother that, quote, "I can't choose what I wear. I don't have the right to dance in public. By law, I'm not allowed to be myself. I'm already dead. But when I go to the street, I have a dream, and that makes me alive."
Lastly, we move to our final story from the United States context. Renee, a 16-year-old who lives in the state of Tennessee in the United States, is transgender and lives in fear as she experiences harassment daily. Renee is used to being different, or at least to being perceived as different from her friends and classmates. While her birth certificate lists her assigned sex as male, Renee's parents noticed from the age of 4 that she did not see herself as a boy. Renee's parents corrected her at first, telling her that she was a boy and that other people saw her as a boy, but Renee refused to accept this. She insisted she was a girl and was persistent in this identity no matter what her parents or teachers said. After some time, Renee's parents stopped pushing back and instead allowed her to dress as she wished, play as she wished, and act as she wished. At age 8, as Renee continued to insist upon her female identity, her parents scheduled an appointment with a developmental psychologist. After a series of sessions, Renee was diagnosed with gender dysphoria, and her parents were advised on the importance of honoring and respecting Renee's gender identity. Renee's psychologist stressed that gender dysphoria was not a mental illness, and that Renee was not experiencing delusions or fantasies, but that the diagnosis was important in order for insurance to cover gender-affirming care. Renee's psychologist consulted with her pediatrician, and together they created a care plan that best supported Renee's health, gender, identity, development, and dignity. As Renee entered high school, she became increasingly aware of the conversations going on around her. One day, her school bus driver was playing a podcast by Michael Knowles, a conservative political commentator, and Renee listened as he claimed that transgenderism must be eradicated from public life entirely. At lunchtime, she overheard the Young Conservatives Club talk about a church sermon they attended where a preacher told them that transgender people were groomers and pedophiles, and they must be eliminated from the earth in order for Jesus to return. Renee had been hearing hateful remarks almost daily for a few years now, and she now watches as her school district bans books that mention the topics of gender or sexuality, and as her teachers are now restricted on the language that they could use to discuss such matters in class. The hardest hit came last year, when her pediatrician advised her he would have to stop prescribing the hormone blockers she had been taking for a few years now. A new law has been passed that charges medical providers who provide gender-affirming care to people under the age of 26 with a felony and subjects them to a life in prison. Although Renee had once been respected for her gender identity, now due to changing public opinion, new legislation, and harsher responses by political and religious leaders, the message is clear. Renee feels she is not wanted and not welcome to exist. Although her parents tried to do everything in their power to provide her with as much support and acceptance at home, Renee now struggles with depression and suicidal ideation as she confronts bullying and rejection daily. While this story about Renee is based on real experiences of trans youth, the story and the character of Renee are fictional. In fact, the image on your screen was generated by an AI. We did not assign any race to Renee, but we wish to highlight that trans people of color experience hate crimes at a higher rate than white-bodied trans people, and often their stories are not shared. If you feel called to explore further, please use the QR code on the screen to understand the experience of trans people in more depth. We're now going to move to show you our conflict tree, which was one of the conflict analysis models that Paula mentioned we use as part of our project. And firstly, we look at the trunk or the core problem in this conflict. We identified it as challenges to socially accepted norms and structures of power result in violence, including erasure and silencing of individuals and their experiences. Next, we move on to the effects, which are depicted in the tree as the branches or the leaves. In this context, we see effects like increasing levels of dominance and structural suppression in response to challenging the status quo, denial of human rights, and slanderous propaganda blaming women and trans identities for completely unrelated social problems.
And then in the root causes, in all these three contexts, we identified the religious extremism and nationalism, patriarchy, and that governments motivated by dominance and influence protected by conservative religious ideologies, and also the generational and social trauma. And we would like to explain the commonalities we identified in each of these contexts according to these root causes. Talking about the patriarchy, we elevate Bell Hook's understanding of patriarchy as an interlocking system of class, empire, capitalism, and racism, and more specifically, understand patriarchy as a mental illness of disordered desire. Therefore, we see patriarchy as a deeply rooted structure and train of thoughts that desire to dominate over others and maintain power in regardless of harm and disregard of dignity and its actions entail. In Pakistan context, the father, brother, or husband can settle the issue of honor killing on behalf of the murdered woman. This implies that when a father, brother, or husband kills his wife, sister, or daughter, the family often sits together and resolve the case before it goes to the police or the court. Even if the case goes to the police or court, the man of a victim's family still have power to withdraw the case or grant the killer forgiveness. In the case of United States, transphobia and violence against trans people in the United States, studies shows that the violence and hatred is often a result of the perpetrators' own discomfort with themselves and or their desire to possess power over other individuals. As for Iran, the country has a deeply entrenched patriarchal culture where men hold the majority of power and control over women's life. 94.4% of parliament seats are held by men in Iran. This culture is reinforced by traditional beliefs and practices that limit women's rights and opportunities.
Next, we move to the core issue of religious extremism. In Pakistan, extremist Muslims believe that Islamic law encourages honor killings as a means of preserving or restoring honor. In the context of Saba Kaiser, her father claims multiple times that God is on his side and that he would rather rot in prison than have allowed his daughter to bring such shame on the family unpunished. In the context of the United States, transphobia and the criminalization of homosexuality can be traced back to the Middle Ages, when social norms in Europe were influenced by patriarchal Christian teachings. In this time, gender as a binary construct became commonplace, despite the fact that as far back as Mesopotamia and ancient Greece, many revered religious leaders and deities were transgender and thus believed to harness the power of transformation. Due to the eras of imperialism and colonialism, patriarchal Christian beliefs were transferred throughout the world. This binary belief greatly influenced the development of social norms and legal structures in the United States, leading centuries worth of Americans to conceptualize gender and sexuality in very limited ways. In the context of Iran, which is an Islamic republic, the legal system is based on Islamic law or Sharia. Extremist interpretations of Sharia law support the government's control over women's bodies and women's appearance. This belief supports the morality police's ability to harass, subjugate, and torture women.
Talking about the next root cause of political structures. In Pakistan context, in 2004, the government passed a law according to which murders committed in the name of honor would be considered intentional murder. However, the law has been made dysfunctional by community councils called Jirga Panchayat, which maintain peace, allowing honor killings to go unbailed. In the case of Saba Kaiser, the council asked Saba to forgive, saying it's important that we reconcile because we all have to live in this neighborhood. In the USA context, I invite you to look at the graphic on our screen. This chart demonstrates the dramatic increase in anti-trans legislation that have been introduced to the state houses in the past 4 years. These bills target various aspects of transgender life, including blocking access to healthcare, banning books, and suppressing teachers' ability to talk about gender and sexuality in classrooms, reversing anti-discrimination protection, and more. Talking about the Iranian context, the Islamic Revolution in 1979 led to a shift in Iran's political climate, with conservative religious leaders taking control of the government. This has led to policies and laws that limits women's rights, such as the compulsory hijab law that requires women to cover their hair and body in public.
Finally, we move to the topic of social norms. In Pakistan, the common expectation is that women do what their fathers, brothers, and husbands ask. Women making decisions for themselves is at the root of what's deemed dishonorable to their family and traditions. In the United States, historically, the LGBTQ community has been criminalized. As these laws began to shift in the mid-20th century, homosexuality and gender nonconformity was viewed as a mental illness and classified as a, quote, sociopathic personality disturbance. Quote. This perspective promoted abusive treatments and, along with the religious influences, created a social understanding that LGBTQ people were ill and a threat to normal society. This perspective was reinforced through various governmental initiatives during the last half of the 20th century, including the society's response to the HIV/AIDS epidemic in the 1980s. Social norms play a role in shaping women's situation in Iran. For example, there are expectations for women to prioritize their family responsibilities over their career aspirations.
It's very hard realities in the world we live in. For our imagination, now we will show a brief demonstration of the deep-rooted nature of social norms resistant to change. We recorded it with the support of our team members. This kit is developed by Initiatives of Change India Network. We want to give credits to the original creators of the script. We would invite you to watch it. Hi, Corey!
Hey, Rima.
How are you?
I'm pretty good. How are you?
How was last night party?
Oh my gosh, it was so much fun. It was wild. Yeah.
Yes, I really liked it. Have you seen Mary?
No, I haven't. You know, and I think she's been acting kind of weird lately.
Oh, yeah. Here
Yeah.
she comes.
Oh,
Hi, Mary.
hey Mary. How's it going?
Yeah.
Oh, it's okay.
What's happening with you?
I've been thinking.
Thinking.
Who thinks these days, Mary?
Honestly, just stop.
I've been thinking,
Mm-hmm.
what if we walk on our 2 feet?
Oh my God.
You can't be serious.
Yeah.
I'm serious.
Walking on your feet?
I saw someone do it before.
Really?
Tell her.
I don't think that person was in his mind.
No. This is how our ancestors
Just
walked.
yeah.
This is how our parents walked. This is how we walk. This is what walking is.
Look! No, look! That guy's walking!
Oh,
I wouldn't pay
That's so
attention.
cool.
No, don't. He's probably crazy.
I think he's crazy.
No, yeah, don't pay attention.
Don't even think about it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna try it.
No.
No, Mary, you're gonna hurt
No.
yourself. You're gonna
I'm
fall.
gonna try it.
No, you're gonna hurt yourself. No. See?
See?
I told you. Yeah. I mean, you could listen to us, but clearly you don't want to.
I'm gonna try it again. It's gonna
I
work.
don't know how to tell you.
Yeah,
He
I
did it?
Don't.
Yeah, but he was crazy. This is crazy.
Oh my gosh, it's so amazing up here. The view is incredible. You can see the trees and the mountains. It's beautiful. You have to try this.
This is not right.
It's
Corey, don't
so
even think about
cool.
it. Shh.
I think I'm kind of.
You guys don't know what you're doing.
I can help you.
This is no.
It's really,
Corey.
really
I
cool.
can
It's
try.
so beautiful.
Oh
I wanna
no.
try.
These two
Yeah.
gone crazy.
Okay.
Alright, you got this?
Oh. Oh my goodness.
Right?
You're right.
So amazing, Lima!
I can see so
Tell you
far.
guys,
It's so
you're
beautiful.
crazy.
This is gorgeous.
You guys are not my friends anymore. I'm gonna block you in my Instagram, Facebook. Please go away. Don't even talk to me.
Thank you. That skit simplifies a
Hi, Corey.
Hey, Rima.
phenomenon. 1 second. So as I was saying, that skit does complexify or simplify rather a complex phenomena about social change. Sometimes even if the change might bring about a great advantage, depending on your perspective and what you've been taught to know and see, you might not be able to see that advantage, such as walking on your feet rather than on your knees. To get into more practical spaces of change, we created 5 theories of change and focusing specifically on our Pakistan context. The first theory of change we developed was if religious leaders regularly convene to discuss honor killings, then they will be better equipped to embody a unified stance of opposition and thus influence social and political beliefs about honor killings. We recognize a bit of a challenge to working with religious leaders, and that in some cases, this might actually create difficulty for victims' justice needs. Considering religious leaders do convene annually, we see that this is an important space, an opportunity to inject and begin discussions about honor killings, ideally beginning with a group of people who are wish to eradicate honor killings from Pakistan and allow that conversation to grow year after year.
The second theory of change we came up with, if verses from Quran, which are related to women's rights, women's equality and preservation of life are promoted during prayers and religious education, then society's perception about the treatment of women will slowly shift towards one of equality and respect. And for that, we gave the example from Surah Nisa chapter 4 and ayat verse 19. It says, "It is not permissible for you to inherit women against their will or mistreat them. Treat them fairly. If you happen to dislike them, you may hate something which Allah turns into a great blessing."
Our third theory of change says that if religious leaders host community circles to discuss the harms of honor killings, then community justice officials, including the Jirga and Panchayat, will be better equipped to respond to honor killings in a manner that respects the needs and dignity of victims.
Our fourth theory of change says, if kids are taught about the history of honor killings and the destruction that it promotes in Pakistani societies, then they will grow up understanding the practice as immoral, illegal, and wrong.
And finally, if social norms about honor killings shift in response to these multi-level interventions and more, then the legal framework that criminalizes honor killings will be more supported and better enforced. We thank you for hearing a sort of a brief introduction to our analysis and our project. We invite you to use the QR code on your screen to visit our blog, where we go into a bit more depth on all stages from our imagination and narration. And we did want to share an interesting fact that since we published this blog back in April and circulated it amongst our small community, we have had 82 site visits from 38 different people. Some people came multiple times, including ourselves, for full honesty. But we're thankful for this because often in spaces of academia, literature is not easily dispersed to the communities that literature is conducted on, or perhaps doesn't get more than 2 or 3 views sometimes. So we're very thankful for the people who have checked out our blog and invite you to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pima and Corey. I would like to invite now for the third presentation of this session, Stella Mbalu-Kayenga. Stella holds a PhD in theology, science of religion and missiology from the University of Pretoria, South Africa. She is currently doing a master program in conflict transformation and certificate in restorative justice at Eastern Mennonite University. And Philip Saturday Kwenkwe. Philip is a Liberian gender diversity and social justice activist with over 8 years of experience in nonprofit organizations. He is the founder and coordinator of the Alternatives to Violence Project Liberia, Students Initiative, and the Liberian Dad for Gender Equality. Previously, he worked as advocacy officer for the Lutheran Church in Liberia, HIV and AIDS program. Philip is a trauma healing counselor trained by the Lutheran Church in Liberia and Healing and Rebuilding Our Community International, based in Rwanda and Burundi. Philip holds a BA in sociology from the AME Zion University. Please, Stella and Philip.
Thank you so much, Paula. I would like to thank also the previous people that presented, Wima and Corey. Thank you for your presentation. That was very great. Me and Philip will be presenting the impact of patriarchal belief leading to gender inequality, the case of Nigeria and the United States. So we cannot continue, or we cannot present this research without acknowledging the contribution of one of our colleagues, Anna Dogbe, who contributed a lot in this research. So as Paula mentioned in the beginning, we started this research that was linked to a course that we had last semester during spring, I would say. So my curiosity raised for me to do this research was because I'm coming from Africa, and I've been many countries in Africa. Like Africa, it's really based in patriarchal belief, and patriarchal impact African belief and culture so much. Me as a researcher, a PhD, and I'm still studying, so I've been through a lot of discrimination or a lot of things that make like impact negatively my being or the way I study. So that's why I was so curious when I came to the US, and I say, let me check if the US, the system also still applying here. And then you will hear more about what my research is talking about, what I found in the US regarding the patriarchal belief and the impact of the patriarchal belief. So we are going to touch about discrimination and disempowerment and vulnerability. So patriarchal system is a social good structure in which men have primacy over the female counterparts. It impacts many aspects of daily life, from economic system, business management, political leadership, religious organization, and decision-making power in the household, where men have the power over property as the head of the home. This challenging patriarchal has been going on for generations, and research has shown that it will take many generations to eliminate the system of patriarchal. In this project, we study the patriarchal belief leading to gender inequality, which focus on Nigeria and the United States. In the context of these two countries, the research will bring some proxies that may be useful to change the patriarchal system positively, which Paula just mentioned, the theory of change. So we bring some practices that we think that it can be good for the change of patriarchal system positively. So the impact of patriarchal belief in the US. In this study, culture is defined as the customary belief, social form, and material characteristic of race, religion, or social group. Also characteristics of everyday existence, such as lifestyle shared by people in a place or time. According to the research done, it would be unreasonable to say that women today are not fully equal to men in terms of legal status. Nevertheless, the legacy of the package doctrine, although largely eliminated, has not yet fully been rooted out. In my observation in America, both women and men are equal. However, the life experience of men and women differ in many ways. For example, with regard to women's rights, women experience at work, at home, and with having children. Anonymous interview with 2 American women, they said that there are far fewer female entrepreneurs than male entrepreneurs. In general, women make less money than men, even if they are doing the same type of work. In addition, women may not be promoted. Moreover, most American women find it difficult balancing their careers with the personal life. Example, it's difficult for a woman to work while taking care of her family. When women give birth, they need a period of rest. This is known as a maternity leave. Most of women are entitled to 3 months of unpaid leave. Some companies pay part of the employee's salary. Pregnancy discrimination is differently treatment of women because of their pregnancy or children birth. For example, forcing a pregnant woman to take extended leave when she doesn't want to. Firing some for expressing breast milk in the office and not having private space to express it. Not considering a pregnant woman for promotion. So in America, what I've seen and what also the people that I've interviewed, they said that there's those patriarchal impact is impacting negatively the culture of America. I just mentioned some of them. So the study has shown that a number of United States women face household violence and abuse for their partners. Approximately 1 in 3 women report experiencing abuse. It may go beyond that, as most women are scared or ashamed to speak publicly regarding issue of abuse. Sexism means treating men and women differently. It can happen to anyone, but for the most part of women are treated negatively. For example, not having a promotion because you are a woman, men interrupting you in a meeting, your boss calling you names like honey, baby, sweetheart. So that is what the women in America, according to my research and interviews that I've done, the database that I come with. So we go to the conflict tree for the gender inequality. The effect which we found according to which apply to America is the effect is more likely than the effect is in this picture, it's a representation of a conflict tree illustrated the effect of gender inequality and women discrimination in relation to its sources. With the list of the effect of gender inequality and women discrimination is extensive, this research will only describe a few. The conflict tree lens aims to address the equality of what by identifying the underlying cause and consequence of gender inequality. By using this lens, one can establish a logical connection between the visible sign of the issue and the fundamental reasons that have contributed to its emergence. These three show the root and effect of gender inequality and women discrimination. It is truly applicable in the US and also in Nigeria as we do our research. The effect of gender inequality and women discrimination placed at the top of the tree, as you see at the top of the tree. One notable effect is the underrepresentation of women in government and management position. In the US, we found that in the government, there is underrepresentation of women and as well also management or the CEO position in the US. Women are not really having those positions. There's men with occupying the majority of this role globally. Women are often pushed toward low-paying social professionals, resulting in a gender pay gap between male and female employees. Furthermore, society tends to label certain jobs as female professions, such as education and kindergarten teaching, discouraging men from pursuing them. There is social pressure on men to choose well-paid jobs, where it's considered unacceptable for a woman to have low-paid jobs. Women are often subject to public opinion pressure that suggests that they are bad mothers if they send their children to kindergarten and work outside the home. Similarly, men face pressure not to share equally child care responsibility, such as choosing to be the primary caregiver during maternity leave instead of the mother who may be able to work full-time. As a result, motherhood for women can lead to lower pension payment due to professional break taken to care for children. The bottom of the tree is the core issue. The core issue is the middle part of the tree. The core issue is the middle of the tree, whereby we're talking about gender inequality and women discrimination. So we found that there is the core issue is gender inequality and women discrimination. So the bottom of the tree, we talk about the roots of the gender inequality and women discrimination. Despite being in the year 2023, women still face discrimination in various parts of the world. The answer to this issue can be found in the root cause, which is the root of the tree, including patriarchal belief deeply embedded in society and convertative gender role model. Unfortunately, the legal system has not done enough to protect equality rights for women, whether it is in Africa, Europe, or US, or elsewhere. To achieve gender inequality, it is essential to address the root cause of gender inequality and discrimination against women. One of the most significant root causes in the patriarchal system, which has long perpetuated gender inequality across society. Therefore, dismantling the patriarchal system is crucial to achieving gender inequality. I will give to Philip to give us the theory of change.
Thank you very much, Stella. I just want to again echo that this research was done from 3 countries, that is Nigeria, the USA, and Germany. But for the purpose of this presentation, we want to focus on 2 countries, that is Nigeria and USA. So we're going to go to the theory of change. But before the theory of change, I just want to give you a little bit of synopsis of what we discovered in Nigeria. And this research is done by, this aspect was discovered by a Nigerian researcher by the name of Doko. And he referred to patriarchy in Nigeria, and he said it was not as widespread in Nigeria as it is today. So this is describing Nigeria before colonization. And he also argued that the system of patriarchy was in modern Nigeria was introduced by external factors like religion in the form of Islam, Christianity, colonization, and Western education. Another researcher also that was cited by Doko also defined matriarchy as a social organization focused on the power of women as mothers and on the maternal ownership of the home and wealth. Example, Ghana, the famous soccer star son, the Ayew brothers. So Abeti Pele is a famous Ghanaian soccer player. But if you do a further research, you realize that he is bearing the name of his mother, and so are his 2 sons. And in Ghana, it is referred to as the motherland. So when 2 couples have a child, it is the authority or the power of the woman to name the child, and that child will be named after the mother, father. So they refer to that as the motherland. Unlike in Nigeria, in my country, the case is different. Also, according to Eagles, they say every man was the husband of every woman in his extended family, and every woman was the wife of all the men in the family. Only the woman knew the children. That is describing the situation in modern, or let's say post-colonial Nigeria. It was a situation that mothers had so much power over the kids. Even when there was separation, the man would walk away and the kids would live with the woman. Despite all that, there was still inequality that was perpetuated because, according to the research, whatsoever utensil that they own as partner, when the husband is walking away, he will leave the kids and he will walk away with the rest of the property. But again, when colonization came, there was this argument of every woman being the wife of every man as being described as polygamism. And then as an African male, also connected with the Nigerian society, some of the discussion that have come as critique, we would blame Westerner referring to us as being practicing polygamism, but then in the Western world, there is also something that is referred to as open marriage. And that is some argument that some African also try to use to say, okay, we're not going to change to fit in, so we got to stand by our identity. So those are some of the conflict and some of the argument that keep coming back and forth. Next slide, please. So having done this research, these are theory of change that we discover, and we feel if we work towards this theory of change, we will be able to at least minimize, to reduce, or probably eradicate some of the toxic masculinity and some of the patriarchal system that is hindering inequality, leading to underdevelopment in Nigeria and, let's say, African country. So theory number one, we say, if we develop a mental behavior change ambassadors, individuals will have the skills and abilities to challenge the system of patriarchy in the home. For example, Men Engage Nigeria is an advocacy group working towards achieving gender justice in Nigeria. Also, the Liberian Dialogue for Gender Equality is developing behavior change ambassadors by working with students in Liberia. That organization was established by me, including a few Liberian men. We try to change toxic masculinity in Liberia. And I'm glad that it keeps growing because right now the BBC, that is the British Broadcasting System, the correspondent of Liberia is member of this organization. Even the Swedish ambassador to Liberia, he just joined this organization. And the Army Chief of Staff of Liberia, he has just joined this organization. And subsequently, you're going to see some picture of some of the work that we're doing as evident. So our next theory say, if we engage stakeholders from cultural and religious background, we will combat cultural and traditional practices that oppress women. The same situation religiously in Nigeria, people using religious quotation, men were created by God, men are the head of the home. These are some biblical references that we are even arguing that maybe we should say, relook at the Bible, or maybe rewrite the Bible and see how everybody can fit in the religious setting. And for this theory of change, we say, for example, educating leaders on the negative impacts of widowhood practices, wife inheritance, female genital mutilation, and all of its impact and implications on women. Nigerian society, if a woman is married to a rich guy and that guy died, the brother is going to come and take ownership of that property. It is one practice of patriarchy in Nigeria that is creating inequality because there is this belief that the name of the family will have to continue. The next theory says, if we empower boys and girls on issues related to their basic rights, they will make informed decisions on their choices. They will make informed decisions on their choices. For example, there is a big gap as an African male or Liberian father between my father and myself. We keep going back and forth the way I treat my partner, the way I treat my kids. These are big gap that my father keeps struggling with because he wasn't brought up like that. So if we want to change the system of patriarchy in Nigeria, in Ghana, in Liberia, and the rest of the African society, we need to work with boys and girls in order to detoxify the toxic masculinity that they were brought into. I'm a witness of that. That's why I'm working so hard to see how best the voices of all can be heard. Next slide, please. So this is a Liberian Dialogue for Gender Equality, changing the narrative. This event was the official launch of the Liberian Diet as organization, and it is a famous hotel in Monrovia. It's called Corona Hotel, and this was done on November 20th, 2017. When we just established this organization and we registered it with the government of Liberia. So if you look in the picture, there is a guy and a kid. The kid is in a yellow shirt. That is me. So what you see my kid riding is the African scooter or whatsoever you call it, or walking wheel. That is African made. So I made that to help my son. And it was part of my my role, my gender role in the home. Whenever I was back home from work, it will be my responsibility to help my child, support him in walking. And if you look across the room, there's another guy bottle feeding his baby. This guy sent his wife abroad to obtain her master's degree, and he was staying home to take care of that 3 months old case. And this was a strange and exciting scenario in the Liberian society, because there is this gap and argument that when your wife is educated as an African, there is this intimidation and there is this fear that your wife is going to dominate you. So this young man was changing the narrative. And I'm sitting right there, excited and looking and see how we make an impact in our society. Next slide. Here again, this is photo exhibition of the Liberian Diet at the headquarters of the Liberian National Police. The co-executive director of this organization, he is a police officer, and he is the head of the Women and Children Department of the Liberian National Police. His name is Mr. Yuman Bori. So we organized this event, taking the pictures to police officer and showing to them that you are a police officer. After work, go home and be with your children. Because sexual abuse on case is so high in Liberian society, because the burden of childhood, of gender role, is just resting on the women. So we thought that this can be changed. And we are in connection with our colleagues in Nigeria and trying to change and to share with them some of the practices that we do. Next slide. So here, because this study is focusing on Nigeria, this is our network, and they are called Men Engage Nigeria. Men Engage is a global network organization helping men to understand some of the challenges and some of the harm that we cause intentionally and maybe unaware, because we are not informed of all of the challenges that we go through. But this is Men Engage, and you see there's a single man sitting in the midst of women, listening to them, and he's paying key attention. And it is a capacity building that is going on. A few months ago, I was arguing with some colleagues in Liberia. They were talking about challenges that women go through, and my argument was, when you're empowering women, please do not leave us up, because you might be denying us of information that we are just unaware of. So this is Men Engage Nigeria, practical steps that they are taking to change the scenario. Next time. So at this time, I'll turn to my colleague Stella to just do a little bit.
Thank you, Philip, for the presentation about Nigeria and illustration about what is happening in Nigeria, Liberia, and all those two countries in Africa. As an African woman, I know what it means to be educated woman and looking for a job or getting married. As Philip said, that men are very intimidated by you. They think that you dominate, you know too much. There's so many things throwing you when you are educated woman. So we go to the grace, which is linked to the US, and we ask this question to our people following us all over the world. So you may put it in the chat if you have the answer. So the question is, how many women are represented in the House of Representatives in 2023? I'm talking about the US. There's about 435 voting members. So how many women do you think that they are part of the representative house in the US? Please feel free. Nobody's going to grade you. It's just seeing if we have many women or not. Okay, so may you please put the answer next. So as you see, representative in 2023 is in total it's 375 women have been the US representative and 7 more have been no voting delegated. As of March 7, 2023, there are 125 women in the US House of Representatives, not including 4 female no voting delegates, making women 28, let's say 28.7% out of 435 in total. So, which means we are not even 50% women represented in the House of Representatives in the US. May you please go to the second? The second question is, what percentage of women hold the leadership position compared to men in the US? You can put in the chat or you can do the research, but we have also the answer. You can go to the answer quickly because of time. There's just 48%, not even 50. Still, we are still struggling. So there's not that much women in the position of leadership in the US. Can you go next, please? So the last question that we have, you will reflect on it and think about it when you be alone. The World Economic Forum estimate that it may still be some time for gender equality to be achieved. It will take around 200 years. So from now, 200 years for us to achieve this fight of gender equality. But the question that we have for you, what can we do to make the gender equality happen fast? We have conferences, and it didn't start today, a lot of conferences going on about gender equality, but why is it not changing as we just illustrate in this presentation? We're still struggling about gender equality. So what can we do? What is the strategy? Or what can we do to make it fast? Thank you so much.
All right, thank you, Stella and Philip, for the presentation. And I think with that, we close our presenting time and would like to open the space for questions, comments, and for a discussion. Thank you for everyone who have been listening. We would love to hear if there are questions or comments. And would you open the Q&A? Yeah, thank you.
So the first, there's first a hashtag that was added by Michelle, stop killing journalists everywhere. We all stand behind that. A second comment or question asks, first, said, excellent dissertations. Did you manage any info about female journalist killings in Africa, either in Nigeria or other countries, or in Latin America in the last 12 years? Did you guys come across any research? No.
Honestly, we did not come across any research, but what was highly noticeable was this issue of Boko Haram arresting and taking female. Yeah.
And perhaps you would want to join me in here so people can also see you.
Maybe all of us.
All of us, yes. And then there is also one question. So I think that's, we don't have concrete numbers about the number of female journalist killings, but I would, sources that could have that information, I think, is International Amnesty and perhaps Journalists Without Borders. Any other place that come to mind?
Yeah, I think you're right. Honestly, International Mediator Beyond Borders, those are organizations that we can check and do follow research.
Yeah, I think the only maybe slightly similar, it's not about female journalists who were murdered
but we came across some research or a story in Ghana, sort of known now as the Ghana 21. And in the year 2021, there were 21 LGBTQ activists who were arrested and imprisoned for a month by the police. There were not any murders in that, and they were all released successfully. That's one case that came from Africa. Yeah.
And in regards to the research we did in the Iranian context, the numbers differ from real reports. And we have a colleague in our class who's an activist from Iran. So we get some sources. So we want to just mention that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Michelle, for that question. And I see Maria Eduarda Duda. Bom que você tá aqui. And she asks, hi, we can put on the chat because it's not available, but just to let you know, your presentation was amazing. Thank you, that's very kind. And are there any other questions that we don't see? Perhaps Elvia, would you help us with? The question and answer is the only place where we can see the questions, right? So if there are any questions that, yeah, people would like to drop in the chat or in the Q&A box. Any final comments that you would like to add? Yes.
En YouTube tampoco hay comentarios.
I couldn't hear.
Spanish.
Can you say it again?
En YouTube tampoco tenemos ahí comentarios.
Vale, gracias. Gracias. So I think that's it. Would you have any final comments that you would like to add?
Appreciation for everybody who watched. Thank you.
My comment will be, La lucha continues, so we're still fighting for the rights of the gender base. Yeah, until it's happened.
And for me, I would like to add that even as we mentioned in our presentation, these are hard realities we live in, and we try to voice out things that are not being actually voiced out to the world. So when you have the power, do it. And that's the invitation to everybody.
So for me, as a male, I would like to share that masculinity bullying is decreasing and negatively impacting our effort. So I will encourage everyone to stop bullying men when they try to at least change the narrative, because I'm a witness, I've been affected and impacted by that.
All right. So I think with that, I would like to thank you, Shashi Da Silva, who has been our tech support for today. And thank again everyone for coming and joining and sharing your ideas. Thank you for those who have been watching. And once again, thank you, Elvia, very much, and all the team behind the gender and with Peace Building Lenses.
Gracias a ustedes, Paula. En el chat hay pues felicitaciones a su trabajo, a las investigaciones, a lo que han compartido. Para nosotras en la universidad y en el programa de Género e Inclusión, todo lo que ustedes compartieron, todo lo que nos platicaron sobre las vivencias de las personas de la diversidad sexogenérica, sobre la participación de las mujeres, sobre todos estos puntos que ustedes comentaron, nos parecen muy, muy importantes. Tenemos la gran ventaja con este congreso en línea que las presentaciones se quedan en YouTube y muchas personas a veces no pueden estar presentes en el momento de la presentación, sin embargo, más tarde la buscan y la escuchan, entonces es un conocimiento que se queda ahí para compartir durante pues mucho tiempo con quien tenga interés. Entonces, pues les agradecemos muchísimo, Paula, por coordinar este panel, estas interesantísimas e importantes presentaciones, y por supuesto al CJP de la Universidad de la Eastern Mennonite de Virginia. Les agradecemos muchísimo su confianza un año más para estar con nosotras en este congreso. Un abrazo bien, bien grande a todo el mundo por allá en la EMU, a Vernon, a Elena, a Alena, a todo el mundo. Un abrazo grande para todas y todos y todas ustedes. Gracias.
Muchas gracias. Gracias.